Hey class, next video here that we want to talk about is the research proposal. We're now assuming that you have a general topic in mind, and it's now time to write a research proposal and submit it to me. And let me go back and to this slide. As I said, this is where you get your topic approved. You don't want to go chasing a rabbit if your topic will not work, okay? Let me say, you'll find condensed version of what I'm talking about on the uploaded sheet for Module 2, where the PowerPoint and videos and files module is located, okay? So you can read all about it, so to speak. Where I've uploaded the file called research proposal. Very original, I know. And the point here, the final point here on the slide, time spent on a research proposal helps ensure a better grade on the final project. We'll come back to that thought in just a minute, and that answers the second point here, why write one? Well, obviously it just said time spent on a research proposal helps ensure a better grade on the final project. Why? Because you're telling me right here on the first bullet point, you're telling me why you're writing the proposal and what is it that you're going to write about, because that's what a research proposal is by definition. You are proposing a topic to me, right? You are getting me on your page. We're getting on the same wavelength, okay? And if I see that there's a problem, I'm gonna give you feedback, and you can try to repair that issue, work around it, or you may end up having to toss the whole idea. It may be off base. That's okay. It happens sometimes, but you may be dead on it, all right? I just need to know. We need to get on the same page. So that's what a research proposal is. You're just basically telling me what you're going to write about. That's the reasoning behind why we're doing it. And what else do you need to know? That it is a scholarly writing. It is in a piece of academic writing. And so you need to be aware of that, and you need to make sure that you write it. You need to write your answers thoroughly, but yet keep it in the one-page guideline, okay? Don't go over, don't go under. If you answer the questions that I have given you, it should be no trouble. A couple of sentences per question, 3 or 4 max, you should get your full page. You also need to include a thesis up at the top, and your thesis is very important to any writing, essay or research paper. And the reason why you need to go ahead and start thinking about your thesis is because it goes hand in hand with what you're going to research. But yet your research drives your thesis. Okay, they play off of each other. Thesis drives the research, research drives the thesis. You kind of have to have both. So you have to be thinking about that. You need to get a working thesis. Yes, it may change somewhat before or during the paper writing process, but it's not going to vary much, or you're going to have to completely throw your sources out and start over. It's gotta, you got to get a plan, and your thesis is the guide for that plan. So that's what else you need to know, and then basically follow the research proposal outline that I have referred to, and do it according to the guidelines set. And let's look then at research proposal questions. Again, these are basically found on the sheet, but I do want to talk about them just a little bit. The questions that you need to address, of course, what do you want to write about? You're telling me what's your topic? The second one, why is the topic important, and what will you accomplish by completing the research? Consider me as a general audience. Okay, what do you think that is important to accomplish, and tell your audience that. All right, why is the topic important to you? How does it affect you? How would it affect me, the general audience? And those kind of things. If you wanted to talk about a hot topic is immigration, and you had narrowed it down to I don't know, the big hot topic is a wall. All right, how would that affect me? How would that affect the general audience? And then the third point, what are you arguing for or against? How does your argument relate to how it would affect me? Okay, being assuming that I'm your general audience. You need to make clear how the topic fits the assignment, and the assignment is to write an argumentative, persuasive paper. And so you need to tell me how the topic fits that. Your information about, you need to include, where will you get your information? That's some of the questions that you need to answer. In other words, what am I going to be looking at? All right, how am I going to organize it in a way that I'm going to answer a specific question about the wall? When you decide that you're talking to the general audience and you're trying to tell the general audience, you're arguing a position, the wall affects you like this. What are the questions that you're going to answer about that effect? Okay? In other words, how does it affect me? It's that simple. What are the sources that you will be using in order to answer that how and the so what portion of the question? Remember, it always goes back to, all right, I've just presented you with an argument. I've just presented you the general audience, referring to myself. So what? Now, you've got to answer that with evidence. And I'm talking here about primary and secondary sources. Primary, I've uploaded a sheet that explains this in a little bit more detail. But basically, a primary source is, if you want to stick with the topic of immigration, for an example, if you wanted to look at what the Constitution said about that, that is a primary source. And I'll stop here and tell you that you are required to submit as one of your sources a primary source, just one, but you're going to need a primary source. And a secondary source is what would be said an interpretation of the Constitution. In other words, the primary source Constitution, secondary sources are those who talk about it and write journal articles about it, and they may comment about it on TV or something like that. Okay, that's the difference. It's not really that complicated. I'm going to mention more about primary and secondary later. This is the some more just the basic definition. Primary source is original text or the original evidence, whatever that original may be. Secondary evidence, documents or recordings that relate or discuss a primary source. All right, just look at the sheet. It's pretty straightforward assignment for us. You need to just answer these, and you can't answer those unless you have a fairly set idea about what direction you're going to want to take with this paper. So you've got to make sure you have done your homework. Remember, you cannot write a paper without reading. You have to do a review of the literature, meaning what's out there about this topic, what is being said about this topic that I want to research. All right, you've got to review it before you write about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing your proposals. I'm sure they'll be wonderful, and be looking for them on the due date. We'll move on to the next slide now. hey class, this is where it starts. This is where we're going to start writing the research paper. And you have to start somewhere, and you have to start by getting a topic. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. It says research begins here. Let me talk a little bit about, before we move forward, what kind of paper that we're writing. I mentioned in the library introduction, where in the assignments, that I told you that you are going to be writing an argumentative, persuasive research paper, okay? And so whatever your thesis is, you're going to have to make that into a debatable statement. And we'll talk a little bit further about the particulars about how to write that. But you need to keep in mind that your topic needs to be one that is debatable. So there's a lot of things out there that's just facts and they're not debatable. Stay away from those. If you said that you were interested in writing something about texting and driving, and you proposed a thesis that said no one should text while driving, or better yet, texting is hazardous to safe driving. That is not really debatable, because the statistics show, and it is a common knowledge, that it's dangerous to text and drive. It's hard to debate such a hardcore fact. Stay away from those. You want a debatable topic, all right? Why an argumentative paper? If you don't learn anything else in this class, I hope that you take this point and you understand the reasoning behind the importance of what we're about to do. It's not just for this class, it's not just for other papers that you might write, it's what you'll benefit from grasping the reasoning and take it with you as an individual. The reason why is because you need to know how to argue, and argue as an educated individual. And what that means is you can't just, because so-and-so said it, then that's the reason why it must be true. I always use the example that there's two types of people, and we all know those two types of people. They're the ones that if you hear something from that they said about something or someone, a topic, then it must be the gospel. They're usually right, almost 99% of the time. They have their facts straight. They don't say it unless they know that it's true. They, in other words, more than likely, get their information from reliable sources, all right? Or either they don't say it unless they actually experienced it themselves, or they heard it from the primary source. We'll talk a little bit more about primary sources later. Okay, so those are the people that you usually, if you hear a rumor from, you say, okay, that I'm going to believe it because this person's usually reliable. This source is usually reliable. Then you have another person over here that you hear talk about, all right, group B, all right. Those type people, or that person that you may know, we all know someone like this. They pop off of the mouth and they don't know anything, but they think that they do. And how you know that they don't know anything is that you have been witnessed to and you have watched through the years that they will tell things and come to find out they're not true. Did they just outright lie? Not necessarily. They may be repeating exactly what they heard. It's just that they're relying on poor sources. Their sources that they're getting their information from are not valid. What they are doing is they are presenting an argument, or they're presenting information, evidence, without base. Okay, they're their arguments are not valid because their evidence is faulty. You must understand that in order to be believable, then in order to argue a position, you have to back it up. You can't just say, I'm for or against a certain issue. Why are you for or against it? And it can't be because grandfather said, or it can't be because I read on Facebook. It can't be because I heard on the nightly news. Those are all places to start, but why? You go to those sources and you read and you make sure that you have a valid source. But of course, if you may say, of course, if I heard it on the nightly news, it must be the gospel. No, because you can trust me on this. If you have the time, you can go and listen to one network. They're talking about the same topic. Flip over to the next. They just said something completely different than what the other one did. You have to find the truth. How you do that? Sometimes you have to go to the primary source, the one that originally wrote it or the one that originally said it. And then you decide for yourself what is true or what's false. That's my pitch for the importance, and it's so vital that you understand why, and always try to remember that if you're faced with trying to argue or persuade someone, you have to get your facts down. You have to be the expert, or they're not listening to you. Okay? That's the plain, simple truth. Let's look at this. You have to argue with evidence. He says here, sorry, I mistook your inability to speak clearly and make a coherent argument as ignorance. I apologize for that. Okay, just to be very blunt, if you do not argue with evidence, and not just any evidence, but valid evidence, you look ignorant. That's the whole point. Don't look ignorant. Be smart. I'm going to give you some tips about narrowing a topic. There's no certain way about narrowing a topic. Some of you may already have, you may know a better method than I'm going to give you, and that's fine. Go with that. Just as long as you get a narrow topic to present to me in your assignment, the research proposal that's due. Okay, I don't care either way, but I'm going to give you some suggestions, some things that I have done in the past. Here's the first way that you might want to try. Y'all are familiar with who, what, when, where, why, and how. You take a topic and you just fill those in. 5 words per category. If you divided these out, looked at these like categories, each one of these, who is a category, what is a category, and then you take a particular topic that you may have in mind. And I'm going to use an example. And some of you may know what I'm talking about, and some of you might not know. But I'm one of these that I've always enjoyed, unsolved mysteries and conspiracy theories. And also this topic that I'm going to use as an example is because I'm of the age group that I remember it happening. I was young, but I do remember it happening. The John Benet Ramsey case. I just want to use that as an example. You don't have to use this. Understand, you don't have to use this topic, but we're gonna walk through this process as a hypothetical, okay? And you may find, what I'm hoping is that if you don't have a clue what you're going to research, maybe you can find a topic while we're walking through this. Let me just create something here. Let's say who. Let's divide that out. If you're talking about the case, and again, it doesn't matter if you know much about it or if you know nothing about it, the people that are involved, and that would be, of course, whatever topic that you choose. Who's involved in it? In this case, It's the mom, the dad, the brother. Remember, we're wanting to get 5 if we can. The police in Boulder, Colorado. And let's go with an intruder as a possible suspect in the murder, okay? Those are 5. There's other people involved, but these were the main players. These are the main things that come to mind when I think of the JonBenet Ramsey topic. What about what? Okay. Again, 5. If we're thinking about, okay, so what about the case? What pops when I'm asking myself, what about the case is would be arguable? What about the case needs researching? Well, it's obvious. The obvious thing is it's an unsolved case. All right, it's actually, I guess, what you would call a cold case. Another what would be this is an ongoing investigation. Yeah, it's an well, yeah, it's an ongoing investigation because it was very in 2016. I think it was the 22nd anniversary of her death. Okay, the investigation. It was I'm trying to think of the word. It was a faulty. It was a faulty. That should probably go faulty investigation. We'll put that in parentheses, okay? Because it was a faulty investigation, basically. It had a lot of issues in it. All right, a lot of police bobbles. And you talk about what else? Like I said, I guess you could put in there that it is an ongoing case. You may not can get 5 right off the top of your head. You need to shoot for 5. Let's move on for time's sake and do the when. It happened Christmas, sometime that day or that night rather, the day after Christmas. It happened. The when could be the time of murder, and it could be when the 911 call happened. So, well, let's put occurred. Notice that when does not necessarily mean a date. All right? I didn't say when did it occur and say December the 26th and leave it at that, right? You're breaking it down. The main things when you say when about this case, what time significant about this, when main occurrences happened, all right? Same thing with what you may do. Again, I'm not going to go through all of the steps, but if you went through all the who, what, when, where, and why, and the how, you would begin to see things emerging that they repeat. And you could back off and you can look and could say, okay, this I keep seeing that the investigation, because I've got police appear. It's an unsolved case. So there's something that we could do about how the investigation was botched. All right, you could argue that because of the crime scene not being secure, you could argue so many things about that. You could when you think of topics, Your mind is like a spider web chart, just like I showed on the mind, like the credo, where you can go and type in a topic and it does a mind map. This mechanism that I'm showing you is meant for you to do a mind map. When I'm looking at this, I'm not necessarily sticking with the John Benet Ramsey case as a topic. I may decide, 911 call. I could do something, I could research an arguable topic about 911 calls, the admissibility of them. There's so many topics out there. There's so many ways of arguing a topic, right? Up here, was it an intruder? Okay. If I wanted to stick with the case, there's also an intruder. Could have been, okay, who? This little girl was involved in pageants. All right. It's believed that it could have been someone that knew them from the pageant scene that may have killed her. Well, I may decide, you know what, I've always been interested in, should 5-year-olds be allowed to participate in pageants? Do you see that it doesn't necessarily have to be about the topic that you're trying to mind map? What it does is it prompts you, that sounds cool. That sounds like something that I might want to research. I want to do the pageant angle. All right. Intruder. You might want to look at, I don't know. It's argued that it might have been sometimes, I hate to be brutally honest about this, but it is a well-known fact that a lot of times with these elementary pageants, I'm not arguing for or against them, but a lot of times when you get these younger kids involved in these pageants, that a lot of times perps will show up. And did that occur? And so you could argue something about that brings to mind perpetrators for as pedophilia, for as sexual aggressors. Is that nature or is that nurture? Environmental, or were they raised to be that way, or is it just genetic? Are they a product of their environment, or is it genetic? All these things you can think about as you're trying out different. Okay, off the top of my head, I'm gonna do this topic. It's like a ping pong. You're gonna bounce off. Thoughts are gonna bounce off, and you just gotta settle on one. The next slide, for the sake of argument here. Okay, narrowing a topic. Once you've got your 5 words in each category, you can look at each of those and you could say, all right, problem faced by the police, problem faced by the parents, problem faced if you were doing immigration, problem faced with securing the border, problem faced with, I don't know, AIDS research, better arguing for more funding for that. Problems faced, okay? Problem overcome. What are some new research out there in the case? What's the motives? Don't think that goes back to a murder case. No, what's the motives behind building a wall? What's the motives behind more research for clean air? All right. What's the effect on a group, one group of people? What about the members of the group? as a whole. Okay, you could say, what was the effect on the parents of this child? You could argue, you could hone that down. You could do something about. Again, your mind is going in the direction because that one original thought caused you to think about something else that you might be interested in. You may do something, then you may say, well, what about parents that have lost a child? How do they grieve? Argue for grief counseling. It's a wide open field of topics out there. I'm not giving you a set topic. A lot of people wish that I would give them some guidelines because it's so wide open. Well, and then I get, well, gosh, I wish I could just do what I want to. Part of narrowing a topic, once you get that down and having a wide open field, you can pretty much then, whatever your assignment is, you can go with it, right? If you can just find the topic on your own out of any area. And you need to like what you're researching. That's the reason why I'm leaving it open, as long as it's narrowed and debatable. So, who's responsible for this action? Who's responsible for the taxpayer needing something, whatever it is that you may be interested in? Here's another possible tip that you might want to look at. You might just simply want to ask yourself the questions. I believe that I suggested that you write down a list of areas that you're interested in. Start by asking, okay, what on this list have I heard lately about that interests me? What's something about it that affects me personally? What would affect the general audience personally? And then ask yourself, after you've gone through those 3 questions, what are the main concepts of the topic? What are the main issues surrounding the topic? And what are the key terms used to describe the topic? Okay? Break it down one step at a time till you get that perfect topic. Another way that you might go about it is to fill in the blanks to discover a topic. I am researching let's see, what would be an example? You could say something about, I am researching media coverage of the media coverage during the JonBenet Ramsey case because I want to find out how it negatively affected or positively affected, however direction I want to take, the investigation. All right, so see, again, you could take it so many different directions. I am researching DNA evidence because I want to find out how the lack of DNA caused the police department to blank. All right, and then I also put down here at the bottom the credo. Of course, always remember to try that one out as well. That is a cool little tool. Narrowing a topic. If you choose to do a familiar topic, such as abortion, it must take an original argument. Look, that's with all of topics. You want an original way or a new way of looking at an old topic. If I had a penny for every time a paper has been written about abortion, I'd be very well off. It's gotten to the point where a lot of teachers won't accept it because, like, oh my gosh, here comes another one. I'm not telling you that. I'm just telling you that it needs to be a new way of looking at an old. Do not turn in one for or against it. That's nothing unusual. That topic's been debated since Roe v. Wade. Okay, there's new topics out there about that. There's new. You've got the Planned Parenthood defunding, potentially, okay? That's a new look at it. That's a new argument for or against that. And you would need to narrow it down if you're interested in something like that. It has to be 5 pages, minimum, 5 to 7 pages. You need to keep that in mind as you're trying to narrow the topic. Okay, would this topic fit with 7 pages tops? Is it too narrow, or does it remain too broad? I mentioned here on the bottom, don't forget the online, the librarians 24/7, the link that I showed you in the video last week. They're not going to give you a topic, but they will, they'll be able to maybe, you say, I'm having trouble finding more information on this, then they're probably going to tell you, okay, look here, let's see if we can look in this area, and if they don't find anything, then they're probably going to tell you you've got too narrow of a topic. Then they will probably tell you this is too broad. If you give them something that is getting, receiving 2,000 returns, if you Google it or do a search for on the Mello, on the databases, okay? What you want is it just needs to be just right. So is it just right? How do I know? When is it too broad? It cannot be covered in detail in your argument. All you can write are general statements about the subject. Difficult to research, too much information out there. You're getting hundreds and thousands of relevant items. Like I said, if you type in something, the list goes on and on. It's too broad. You got to narrow it down. When is it too narrow? Can you discuss it in great detail in less than the required paper size? It's got to be 5 pages. If you're finished in 2, too short, too narrow. Difficult to research because you're not getting enough information. That's just what I said a while ago. Okay, giving you some things to think about. You've got to read. You've got to make that list. You guys, what am I interested in? Maybe something I said you find intriguing. Maybe some suggestions that I gave you. You might want to look into that. Whatever the case, you cannot write a research paper unless you review the literature. And that means you have to read and you have to see what's out there before you know what direction you're going to take. You can't formulate a thesis. You can't do anything until you decide what direction that you're wanting to argue, what position, and cannot argue that position. You may discover through your research that you've been wrong all these years. Or you may discover something that you've been right about. You've often wondered, well, why do I believe that? That you may discover that. Okay, well, I have been right. The fact of the matter is, find your evidence and then present it in the paper and persuade your audience to think as you do, okay? Until the next clip, next time we'll talk about research, the research proposal. You got to get this part done. You got to get in their topic until you can write, then you can write the research proposal, which is due as an assignment, all right? Okay, happy hunting, and I know that you're going to come up with great topics. Looking forward to hearing about them.